Before we begin, here is the title of today's story. The family laughed when the Black Maid spilled tea, until the Mafia Boss took the cup from her hand. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to Danielle Morris. The chandelier above the Whitmore dining room cast a warm, honeyed glow across the long polished table, but not even the soft light could hide the tremble in Danielle's hands as she carried the silver tray. She had been working since dawn, her back aching, her palms dry from cleaning solutions that never seemed gentle, yet she moved with quiet dignity, careful and precise. Tonight, though, the air felt heavier than usual, thick with the kind of laughter that made her chest tighten. She stepped toward Eleanor Whitmore, the matriarch whose diamonds flashed like small stars whenever she lifted her chin. Gregory leaned back in his chair, smirking as though waiting for entertainment. Olivia had her phone angled just enough to capture anything humiliating. The moment Danielle's foot brushed against the edge of the rug, everything shifted. The teacup on the tray slid, clinked against its side, and tumbled. Hot tea splashed across the gleaming floor, scattering porcelain in delicate white shards. For a heartbeat, the room froze. Then the laughter erupted. Sharp, bright, merciless. Eleanor covered her mouth, pretending to hide her smile. Gregory shook his head slowly, as if watching a child fail a simple task. Olivia's phone was already recording. Danielle knelt quickly, her fingers shaking as she reached for the broken pieces. A sting shot through her palm as a shard nicked her skin, but she said nothing. She never did. Years of hard work had taught her that silence was sometimes the only shield she had. She whispered an apology, barely audible, her breath unsteady. The laughter around her swelled, louder than the clatter of porcelain on marble. And yet, beneath that cruel noise, there was another sound. A chair sliding back, quiet but certain. Danielle didn't dare look up, not yet. But she felt the shift in the room, the air tightening the way it sometimes does before a storm rolls in from the horizon. Someone else had stood, someone whose presence altered everything. And though she hadn't yet raised her eyes, she already knew who it was. Danielle remained on the floor, her breath tight in her chest as she tried to gather the broken porcelain pieces without drawing more attention. Her fingers hovered over another shard, but a shadow crossed the marble in front of her, steady and unmoving. She felt it before she saw it, that quiet shift in the room when power decides to stand. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. Vincent Romano stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable, his posture calm in a way that made the entire Whitmore family fall into uneasy silence. His dark suit caught the warm light, but his eyes were colder than the room had felt moments earlier. He did not speak, not yet. He simply watched Danielle, and in that stillness she felt something she had not felt all evening. Protection hovering just beyond reach. Gregory cleared his throat, trying to reclaim the moment with a laugh that wavered. He leaned back in his chair, pretending confidence he no longer possessed. She just made a mess, Vincent. No need to make it dramatic. Eleanor added, her smile brittle. Accidents happen, but she should really be more careful in front of guests. Danielle lowered her eyes again, wishing the floor would open and swallow her. Her hand stung, a thin line of red forming where the porcelain had grazed her skin. She curled her fingers to hide it, but Vincent's eyes dropped to her hand with precise focus. Before she could pull away, his voice cut through the tension with a calmness that carried more weight than any raised tone. She is hurt. 3 words. Soft, simple, and yet they seemed to strike the table harder than any reprimand could. Olivia's phone lowered as if her arm had suddenly grown heavy. Gregory shifted uncomfortably. Even the silverware on the table appeared to freeze mid-glint. Vincent stepped closer, and for a moment Danielle thought he might address the family. Instead, he crouched down beside her, bringing himself to her level with a gentleness that did not match the reputation the city whispered about him. She felt the warmth of his presence before he reached for the last shard on the floor, lifting it carefully so she would not have to. His hand was steady, deliberate. There was no rush, no impatience, only quiet precision. Danielle whispered. I am sorry, sir, her voice barely a breath. Vincent did not look at the broken pieces. He looked at her. There is nothing to be sorry for. The words settled over her like a soft blanket, unexpected and grounding. Behind them, Eleanor let out a faint scoff, trying to salvage her authority. Vincent, darling, she spilled tea at a formal dinner. Surely you see why we expect better. Vincent rose to his full height, the room seeming smaller as he did. He held the broken piece of porcelain in one hand, his gaze sweeping across the family with a calm that was far more intimidating than anger. Danielle remained kneeling, her hands pressed lightly against the floor, but she felt the shift in the air as clearly as she felt her own heartbeat. For the first time that evening, the laughter had stopped. For the first time, the room was listening. The dining room remained suspended in a quiet tension that felt almost fragile, as if one careless breath could shatter it. Danielle stayed kneeling, unsure whether she should rise or disappear entirely, but her body would not yet obey her. She felt the warmth of the marble beneath her palms, the sting in her cut hand, and the heavy awareness that every pair of eyes in the room was fixed on her for reasons she did not understand. Vincent stood with the last piece of broken porcelain resting in his palm, studying it as though it revealed something no one else had noticed. The Whitmore family exchanged glances, unsettled by the shift in control that had quietly slipped from their hands. Olivia finally forced a strained laugh. It is really not that serious. She is being dramatic. Her voice lacked its earlier arrogance. Vincent did not acknowledge her. Instead, he placed the porcelain carefully on the edge of the table, as if even the broken deserved a place to rest. He turned back to Danielle with a gentleness that contrasted the cold precision of his posture. Let me see your hand. The words were not a question. Danielle hesitated, not because she feared him, but because she feared making another mistake. Slowly, she lifted her hand. His expression did not change, but something softened, barely perceptible, like the first hint of dawn behind a dark horizon. He took a linen napkin from the table, folded it neatly, and wrapped it around her palm. His movements were deliberate, steady, and entirely without judgment. Gregory shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the quiet authority unfolding before him. She is fine, Vincent. She has handled worse, I am sure. Vincent's eyes lifted, calm but carrying a depth that made Gregory swallow whatever confidence he had tried to muster. You do not speak for her. Gregory's mouth tightened, and Eleanor reached for her wine glass, her manicured fingers trembling just enough to betray her unease. Danielle felt her breath catch, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar sensation of being defended rather than dismissed. When Vincent finished securing the napkin, he helped her rise with one steady hand under her elbow. She stood slowly, the room tilting slightly as she regained her balance. She murmured a soft thank you, barely audible. Vincent inclined his head, a quiet acknowledgement that carried more respect than any words the Whitmores had offered her in months. He stepped back, giving her space, and only then did he address the room. Accidents reveal character, he said, his voice even, unhurried. Not hers. Yours. A hush swept across the table, as thin and sharp as glass. Eleanor blinked, startled by the implication. Olivia lowered her gaze. Gregory stared at the tablecloth as though the pattern might rescue him. Danielle stood with her hands clasped gently in front of her, unsure where to look, unsure how to exist in a moment where the balance of dignity had shifted without warning. The room felt different now, not safer, but truer, as if the quiet had peeled back pretense and left honesty standing bare in the center of the dining hall. And though Danielle did not fully understand what had changed, she knew one thing with absolute clarity. Someone who mattered had seen her. The silence in the dining room deepened, settling over the long polished table like a soft but undeniable weight. Danielle stood beside Vincent, her hands clasped gently, the wrapped napkin absorbing the small trace of blood from the cut she tried to ignore. She could feel the Whitmore family's eyes drifting between her and Vincent, not with concern, but with the uneasy realization that the evening no longer followed a script they controlled. Eleanor finally broke the quiet, her voice thin as she lifted her chin. Well, this has certainly become unexpected. Vincent, we appreciate your sentiment, but there is no need to make a simple household mistake into something larger. Her attempt at grace felt rehearsed, the kind that cracked under scrutiny. Vincent's gaze moved toward her, calm but unwavering. "It became larger the moment you laughed," he said, his tone even, almost gentle, yet carrying a depth that caused Eleanor's fingers to tighten around her wine glass. Danielle felt her breath catch again, not because of what he said, but because of the way he said it. He was not raising his voice, yet every word seemed to settle into the room with deliberate weight. Gregory shifted uncomfortably in his seat, looking anywhere but at Vincent. Olivia tapped the edge of her phone against the table as if unsure whether to hide it or pretend she had never recorded anything at all. Danielle wished she could step away, wished she could retreat to the kitchen where the air did not feel so sharp against her skin. But Vincent turned to her again, his expression softening, a subtle shift that carried warmth in a way she had not expected from a man like him. "Are you feeling lightheaded?" he asked quietly. Danielle blinked, startled by the question. "No, sir. I am all right." "You lost some blood," he replied. "You should sit." She nodded, though she hesitated, unsure where to sit in a room that had never offered her a place. Eleanor noticed the hesitation and gestured stiffly toward a small side chair near the wall. It was not meant for guests. It was barely meant for comfort. But Vincent's eyes shifted to it, then to Eleanor, with an expression that made her retract her hand. Instead, he pulled out one of the dining chairs from the table, the kind reserved for their inner circle, and set it behind Danielle. "Here," he said. Danielle felt a tremor of disbelief. Sitting at the table, among them, felt unthinkable. She shook her head softly. "I cannot sit there, sir. It is not appropriate." Vincent did not push the chair closer. He simply held it steady, his voice low. "Respect is always appropriate." The room went still again. Eleanor pressed her lips into a thin line. Gregory exhaled sharply, unable to hide his discomfort. Olivia's eyes widened slightly, as though trying to understand how a maid could be offered something so simple, yet so forbidden in their world. Danielle finally lowered herself onto the chair, her movements careful, her posture straight. She felt exposed, visible in a way she had never been allowed to be. But she also felt something unexpected beneath the anxiety, dignity settling back into her bones. Vincent returned to his place at the table, but the air had changed. He no longer blended into the setting as an honored guest. He commanded it, shaping the room's silence into something reflective, something almost reverent. For the first time that evening, the Whitmores did not look at Danielle with amusement or superiority. They looked at her with something closer to uncertainty, the kind that grows when a mirror is suddenly held up to one's behavior. And though Danielle did not yet understand the depth of the shift that had begun, she could feel it quietly unfolding, like a curtain being drawn back to reveal a truth long overdue. Danielle sat with her back straight, her palms resting lightly in her lap, the folded napkin around her hand now warm from her skin. She felt the chair beneath her, solid and unfamiliar, a place she had never imagined occupying in the Whitmore dining room. The chandelier above gave off a soft glow that reflected in the silverware, but the shine felt different now, less intimidating, as though the room itself had shifted its posture. Across the table, Eleanor adjusted her necklace, an elegant gesture meant to draw attention back to herself, but her voice wavered slightly when she spoke. "Vincent, we truly did not mean any harm. It was simply a light moment taken out of context." The attempt at refinement could not disguise the thin layer of discomfort beneath her words. Vincent rested his hands on the table, his posture relaxed but undeniably authoritative. "Humor is not the problem," he said quietly. "Cruelty disguised as humorous." The sentence floated through the air, steady and calm, yet it settled into the room with a weight that made Olivia's shoulders draw inward. Gregory cleared his throat, searching for something to say, but nothing came. Danielle lowered her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by the strange mix of gratitude and discomfort swirling within her. She had never expected anyone to defend her, much less someone like Vincent. She drew a slow breath, steadying herself. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. "I did not wish to disrupt dinner. I only wanted to serve properly." Her words were simple, but the honesty within them made the room pause once more. Vincent looked at her, the faintest trace of warmth easing the sharpness in his gaze. "You did." It was such a small sentence, yet it held more validation than anything she had heard in months. Eleanor attempted a smile, but it was tight at the corners. "Danielle, dear, No one is blaming you. The family's earlier laughter contradicted her claim, and the unspoken truth hung between them like a curtain that refused to fall. Vincent leaned slightly forward, his eyes still gentle but firm enough that the air thickened. Her hand was injured. Her chest, a mix of gratitude and uncertainty, as though her heart was trying to understand a reality it had never been offered before. Vincent's gaze drifted once more toward her hand, not intrusive, but observant in a way that made her feel acknowledged rather than examined. He spoke with a calm steadiness that seemed to reach every corner of the room. She should not continue working tonight. His tone carried a gentle insistence, not aimed at her, but directed toward those who had overlooked her pain a moment earlier. Eleanor straightened, her voice attempting composure. Of course, she can rest if she wishes. We only assumed she preferred to finish her duties. Danielle knew the truth behind those words, but Vincent did not let them linger. Her well-being is not optional. The finality in his tone made Eleanor's lips press together ever so slightly, though she nodded as if in agreement. A soft clink echoed when Olivia set her phone fully on the table, both hands withdrawing from it, her earlier confidence replaced by an awkward stillness. Gregory shifted again, tugging lightly at the cuff of his sleeve as though hoping it would distract from his discomfort. Danielle felt a faint tremor of unease. She did not want to cause trouble, nor did she wish for the family to see her as a burden. Taking a quiet breath, she spoke gently. I can continue, sir. I am used to small injuries. Vincent turned toward her, and his expression softened in a way that made the room subtly recalibrate around the two of them. Being accustomed to something does not make it right. His words were simple, but they slipped into her heart with unexpected clarity, revealing the quiet truth she had too often ignored. He continued, his tone still calm. You deserve care, not endurance. The room fell still at that, the meaning resting heavily on the polished wood of the table. Eleanor opened her mouth slightly as if to object, but she seemed to reconsider, offering instead a thin, measured smile. Danielle, if you would like to step aside for the evening, you may do so. There was a gentleness in her tone now, though Danielle sensed it came less from empathy and more from the shift in power, sitting quietly at the head of the table. Danielle hesitated. If it is all right, I would prefer to finish. Clearing the settings. I do not wish to leave things incomplete. Vincent regarded her for a moment, and something in his eyes, something steady, respectful, acknowledged her desire to maintain dignity through service, not obligation. He gave a single nod. Then allow me to assist you. A soft gasp escaped Olivia, and Gregory's fork paused midair. Eleanor's eyebrows lifted just slightly, though she masked the reaction with a delicate sip of wine. Danielle looked up at Vincent, startled. Sir, you do not need to. Respect is not measured by who does the work, he replied, his voice carrying no hint of performative grandeur. It is measured by how we treat those who do. The room seemed to exhale, its silence deepening into something reflective. Danielle rose slowly, steadying herself as the chair moved gently behind her. She gathered her composure, aware that every step she took now felt different, not because her role had changed, but because someone had finally seen the weight she carried. The Whitmore dining room, once an arena of quiet humiliation, had become a place where the unspoken rules were shifting, where dignity was being quietly rewritten in the soft glow of the chandelier. Danielle moved toward the end of the table, her steps careful, her posture composed despite the quiet storm of emotions beneath her calm exterior. The soft rustle of her uniform was the only sound she made as she reached for the first set of plates. She handled them with her uninjured hand, placing each piece gently onto the tray, determined not to let the linen-wrapped cut hinder her. She had always worked this way, with quiet precision, her presence meant to be as seamless as the polished marble beneath her feet. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, someone had disrupted the script she had lived by for years. Vincent stood a short distance away, watching her in a way that was not supervisory or expectant but attentive, as if he were observing not a task but the person performing it. When she lifted a water glass and her fingers trembled slightly, he stepped forward without hesitation. Allow me, he said. His voice carried the same steady warmth that had threaded through his words all evening, a tone that seemed capable of softening even the chill that lingered in the Whitmore home. Danielle hesitated, her instinct urging her to refuse. Sir, I can manage, she said softly. He shook his head once. Care is not interference. And with that, he reached for the tray, his movements smooth and measured, lifting part of the weight from her hands without making her feel replaced. The Whitmore family watched, each with their own quiet reaction. Eleanor's expression remained fixed, poised, yet her eyes betrayed a tightness at the edges, as though she sensed her influence slipping through her fingers. Gregory stared at his plate, visibly uncomfortable, unable to reconcile the dynamic unfolding before him. Olivia, who had earlier filmed with a smirk, now observed with a more complex expression, something between confusion and curiosity. Danielle collected the last of the utensils, placing them neatly onto the tray that Vincent now steadied. She felt an unexpected ease, as though a burden she had not realized she carried had been gently lifted. When she stepped away from the table, Vincent fell into step beside her. Their pace matched naturally, creating a quiet rhythm as they moved toward the kitchen entryway. The soft glow of the chandelier followed them, casting elongated shadows across the marble floor. Near the doorway, Danielle paused, unsure whether she should continue alone. She turned slightly toward Vincent. "Thank you, sir," she murmured, her voice quiet but sincere. "You do not need to help. It is not expected." He met her gaze with a calm assurance. "Expectations are often set by those who benefit from them," he replied. "Respect is a choice." His words settled over her like a warm blanket, their meaning gentle but profound. For a moment, Danielle felt a warmth in her chest that surprised her, something like strength returning to a place that had long been tired. She nodded, her eyes lowering in gratitude. Vincent held the tray for her as she pushed the kitchen door open with her shoulder, and as she stepped into the softer light of the adjoining room, the Whitmore dining hall remained behind them in a reflective silence. The shift in atmosphere lingered long after they crossed the threshold, as though the room itself was still processing the transformation of a moment that had begun with laughter but was now ending in something far more revealing. The kitchen was quiet when Danielle stepped inside, the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint clatter of cooling metal the only sounds waiting for her. The air felt different here, warmer somehow, as though the room offered a gentleness the dining hall never had. She placed the tray carefully on the counter, her movements steady despite the lingering sting in her hand. Vincent followed her in, stopping just far enough to give her space, but close enough that his presence still felt like a quiet shield. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not heavy. It was reflective, the kind that allowed truth to settle before being named. Danielle drew a slow breath and finally looked up. "Sir," she began softly, "I truly did not want to cause tension. The Whitmore family has been generous to employ me." Vincent watched her with a steady calm that made the words feel safe. "Employment is not generosity," he said. "It is an agreement. And you have honored your part." She blinked, surprised by the clarity in his tone. Few people ever framed her work that way. Most saw it as something she should be grateful for simply because she needed it. But his words carried no condescension, only respect. Danielle looked down at her wrapped hand, brushing the edge of the linen with her thumb. "I should have been more careful," she murmured. "It is never my intention to disrupt." "You keep saying that," Vincent replied gently, "as though your existence could burden people who choose not to see you." She froze, the truth of the statement resonating deeper than she expected. She had learned long ago to shrink herself in rooms where she was not invited to exist fully. Now, hearing someone articulate it so plainly made something inside her shift, a quiet ache loosening from a place she had ignored for too long. Vincent stepped closer, his expression thoughtful, not imposing. "You did nothing wrong, Danielle." The laughter said more about them than about you. The words were soft, but the conviction behind them felt like a warm hand resting on her shoulder. She exhaled slowly, a release she had not realized she needed. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice low. "I am not used to ones that painted him as unreachable, untouchable." Yet here he was, offering her a kind of care she had rarely known. A soft knock sounded at the kitchen door, breaking the moment without shattering it. Olivia peeked inside, her earlier arrogance gone, replaced by an uncertainty she did not know how to hide. "Danielle," she said quietly, "I wanted to apologize." The words seemed foreign in her mouth, as though unused to forming such an admission. Danielle glanced at Vincent, but he did not speak. This was her moment. She turned back to Olivia, her posture gentle but grounded. The room felt still, as though holding its breath again, waiting to see how dignity would choose to answer. Danielle held Olivia's uncertain gaze, the kitchen's soft light reflecting in the younger woman's eyes, as though revealing a truth she had spent the evening trying to avoid. The silence stretched between them, not sharp like the laughter earlier, but gentle, waiting. Danielle took a quiet breath, her voice steady when she finally spoke. "Thank you for saying that." She did not offer more, nor did she soften the moment with excuses or dismissal. Her calm acceptance seemed to catch Olivia off guard. Olivia looked down briefly, her voice low. "I should not have filmed you. It was unkind." The simplicity of the admission felt real, stripped of pretense. Danielle nodded once. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what we choose to do after." Her words carried a quiet grace, and Olivia seemed to absorb them, her shoulders loosening just slightly. She offered a small, unsure smile before stepping back toward the door. "I will delete the video," she added. "And, I am sorry." When she left, the door clicked softly behind her, leaving Danielle and Vincent once again in the warm stillness of the kitchen. Danielle exhaled slowly, her posture relaxing for the first time since the evening began. "I did not expect that," she murmured. Vincent watched her, his expression thoughtful. "People often reveal their true nature when they are faced with their own actions," he said. "Sometimes it brings out denial. Sometimes reflection." Danielle turned toward him, her eyes soft but steady. "And sometimes kindness," she added quietly. Vincent held her gaze for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them, something grounded not in power or fear, but in mutual recognition. He gestured gently toward her wrapped hand. "You should have that properly cleaned," he said. "A kitchen napkin will not protect it for long." Danielle looked down at the fabric, now slightly tinged where the cut had pressed against it. "I will take care of it once I finish here," she said. "I want to leave things in order." Vincent nodded, respecting the dignity behind her choice. "Then I will wait," he replied, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. She blinked, surprised. "You do not need to stay, sir. Dinner must still be happening." He shook his head slightly. "They will manage. Tonight, something else matters more." The words were simple, yet they seemed to settle in the air like a warm current, their meaning not grand but sincere. Danielle felt the quiet shift again, that gentle, unfamiliar feeling that had been stirring inside her since the moment he stood up from the table. She turned back to the counter, slowly untying her apron. The fabric slipped through her fingers, and she folded it neatly before setting it aside. Vincent watched, not with impatience, but with a steady calm, as though he understood the significance of even these small motions. When she finished, Danielle straightened her posture, her voice soft. "I am ready." Vincent opened the kitchen door for her, the gesture subtle, yet filled with respect. As she stepped back into the hallway, the soft glow of the chandelier reached them once more, but the air felt different now. Lighter. Truer. Danielle walked forward with a quiet dignity that had always been hers, but tonight, for the first time, the world around her seemed to acknowledge it. And in that gentle, breathless quiet, the Whitmore home witnessed something rare, the undeniable presence of a woman who had been overlooked for far too long, finally seen in the full light of her worth.